All right. Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today, after much fanfare and requests, we have Mike Gatto joining us again to talk a little bit about appropriations. Mike, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here.
We're giving the people what they want. So here we are, Mike, talking appropriations. Just get a little bit into your background. What year did you first come in? Was it 20?
So my election was in April of 2010. Yeah, when Schwarzenegger was governor. And then
who was the speaker at that time?
I want to say it was the Bass to Perez transition.
Okay.
And then I got sworn in June 2010, and I served the nub end of that term. It was most of the legislative year. I always tell people I voted on 7 budgets and I had 7 end of sessions. So, and then I got out in 2016.
And so what's it like being a new member coming in and you have that meeting with the speaker and, you're trying to figure out committee assignments and kind of what you want to do kind of. So coming in as a new member, like what were your goals, what committees to sit on and et cetera?
So, it's fascinating because I felt like I was at a little bit of a disadvantage from other members because, first of all, I was coming in the middle of a term and I knew nobody and nobody knew me. And my first day on the floor, I got mistaken for like a staffer or a page boy. And someone asked me to pass a note to somebody. It was pretty funny. But a lot of members come from one area where they have just tremendous passion. If somebody's a public school teacher for 30 years, and they get elected to the legislature, well, obviously they want to sit on the education committee. And an example of that would be Pat O'Donnell right now. But I was sort of a generalist. My thing was like the business of government. And that's why the Appropriations Committee was so unique to me and so important to me because it sees 90% of the bills and it really focuses on fiscal responsibility.
And so, yeah, the Appropriations Committee is what? Would you say it is the most sought after committee? Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, without tooting the horn of appropriations, look, obviously I'm not there anymore, but the Appropriations Committee and the chair of appropriations is the second most powerful position in each house after the speaker or the president pro tem of the Senate. 90% of the bills go through appropriations. It's just a profoundly important and powerful committee.
Right. And so I guess before being named chair, you sat on the committee, is that right?
I did indeed. I asked for the committee without necessarily any hope of being chair or any grand plan of being chair. Felipe Fuentes was the chair at the time, really good guy and very, very in control appropriations chair. But I asked to go on the committee, even though, as a member of the committee, it's probably one of the least powerful. If you're a member of, let's say GO or, the Utilities Committee, your vote matters. But on appropriations, the rank and file, your vote doesn't really matter. But I asked to be a member of the committee because I like the idea of previewing the bills before they got to the floor. You guys know I'm a big dork, I'm a big policy guy. And I like the idea of, being able to delve into it and see a committee analysis before they came to the floor for a vote. And it turned out to be a very, very good learning experience.
So can you I guess, go a little more in depth on that, on being just a member on appropriations and kind of why your vote doesn't matter as much?
Well, the important thing for people out there who are not familiar with the legislature to understand is that appropriations doesn't vote like the typical committee. Most people out there are pretty familiar. If a committee has 7 members and there's a 4-3 vote, well, that person who casts the 4th vote is king or queen for a day. Appropriations is not really like that. Most of the time, appropriations casts votes by roll calls. And people wonder, is that done just for the expedience of the chair? No, it's actually done because, appropriations sees so many bills every meeting that, if you actually did the math and you said, okay, appropriations is seeing 100 bills today, and, there's 19 members of the committee, and just to call roll on 19 members times 100 bills, and let's say it just took 2 seconds for every member to vote, you're talking hours, right? You're talking a really long time to go through the roll. Maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe it's if each roll took a minute, right? 100 bills, 100 minutes, right? Yeah, that is hours. So appropriations casts votes largely, not always. There's a few where the chair says this is going to be a roll call vote, but most of them are cast by caucus. So the chair will say this one passes on a roll call, which means that Democrats and Republicans have gotten together at the beginning and agreed that their members are both going to vote yes on it. There's a B roll call, which means that the majority party currently, and when I was there, the Democrats have agreed that the bill is going to pass and all Democrats are voting for it. And then there's a C roll call, which means the Republicans are going to try to do it, and maybe they'll pick off a few Democrats. And most often the announcement is that bill fails on a C roll call with a C voting yes. Now, when I was just a rank and file member, I think I drove Felipe crazy, Felipe Fuentes, the chair, because he would say, this bill passes on a B roll call. And I'd say, minus Mike Gatto, right? And then sometimes other members would be like, yeah, and minus, Steve Bradford. And before you know it, you get to so many members that the B roll call does not have the majority anymore, and the bill could actually fail. And that's pretty rare, but I like to think that I sort of pioneered that technique. And gosh, I was a thorn in his side for a while.
So, going from a rank and file to actually becoming the chair, I guess, how did you rise to become the chair of the Appropriations Committee?
Well, I took a real interest in studying at Felipe's, behest or whatever, at his knee, whatever you want to say. I mean, I really tried to read all the bills and learn the process. Jeff Long was the famous political consultant. He hated the nickname, but at the time, everyone called him 81 behind his back. And of course, that references the fact that there are 80 members of the legislature, and he was sort of the 81st member. Very powerful committee consultant, exercised profound control. And I tried to really learn from him and the really stellar staff that Appropriations had at the time. It really just had a really just terrific staff, and I think continues to this day. And, when the time came, Speaker Perez asked me what committee I wanted to chair, and I said Appropriations. And by some miracle, he gave it to me, and the rest is history.
And so how many years then did you chair Appropriations?
I want to say it ended up being about 2 years, possibly a little bit more. 2013 is a little hazy for reasons but I think I came in around 2012, and I think I left in about 2014.
Okay. And then so from being a rank and file member to now becoming chairman, I guess, how did your responsibilities change? And I guess your abilities to kind of be this gatekeeper of legislation?
So, I mean, the first way that things change is that everybody hates you. I mean, no joke. I mean, and to his credit, Speaker Perez told me that, and so did Chairman Fuentes before I took the position. They said, you've got to be prepared to take really tough decisions for the caucus. But, in many cases, you're doing it for the caucus as a whole. But that member who's got the bill is going to absolutely despise you.
Right.
And the problem is that if you're a chairman or chairwoman or chair, long enough, you will make enough tough decisions for enough members that you will have a big enough cadre that hates you, right? And I mean, I had many flaws and totally unrelated to being chair of Appropriations, but I know certain members of the legislature hated me, right, and probably don't like me too much to this day because, I took one of their signature bills and I told them that they could not have it that year.
And so I guess, how did you deal with that? And I guess going into this, I guess, were you okay kind of like taking this kind of like heel position going into it?
Yeah. So, I mean, at that time, there was still a lot of chatter of who would replace Speaker Perez as Speaker. And I know that my name was mentioned, but the reality is because of my familial commitments, I had 2 small children at home. I never, ever went out to the schmooze circuit. I mean, I was always, like dinner with my family at 5 o'clock and tucking them in at 7. And that doesn't really comport with the schmooze circuit and, being able to court members to be Speaker. I knew at that time that I wasn't really going to make a credible play for Speaker. So I thought, what, being the Speaker's henchman is probably the second best thing, right? I mean, it's a position where I get to have a say in 90% of the bills that come through the legislature. And, if I'm going to, anger some people, then that's okay because I'm not running for Speaker. And the other thing is, look, I really did take the fiscal part to heart. And you have to remember, when I was chair, we were in the heart of the Great Recession. There was no money. I mean, we were cutting programs every single year. And, so I really took that to heart. I like the idea of being a control on spending and surprising people and, being a pleasant surprise to editorial boards that I was an actual Democrat who was a little bit conservative when it comes to spending.
Right. Yeah. I guess there used to be kind of like this thought or the kind of this storyline of whoever was Appropriations chair was like the biggest threat to the Speaker. So they'd appoint him to the Appropriations Committee so that everyone would hate them and they would never be threatened.
Maybe that's what John wanted to do to me. Who knows? He was a very, very crafty Speaker.
Yeah. And I guess, part of the Appropriations, committee is, you have Assembly bills going out and you have Senate bills coming in. I guess, is there a kind of a process of when you decide a bill stops? Is there, I guess, an agreement with the Appropriations chair on the other side of, we'll stop your bad bills, but keep, I guess, your in-house relationships kind of thing?
Yeah, yes and no. So, I mean, I guess it would be worth taking a step back for the viewers and talking a little bit about, appropriations, plain mandate, and then the construct of, how that mandate gets, construed to other things. Mm-hmm. So first of all, people are kind of shocked to know that appropriations hasn't always existed. People get a sense of the Federal Appropriations Committee, and they have a sense that in the federal government, the Appropriations Committee appropriates. The Congress will pass a budget and they'll say, we're going to spend $100 million on or $100 billion on roads. And then the appropriators on the Appropriations Committee get together and they say, we're going to spend this much on the 5 freeway and this much on the 95 freeway and this much to California, this much to Florida. Mm-hmm. It does not work that way in the California legislature. California legislature is totally different. In California, there's the budget bill and then there's the trailer bills that effectuate the budget bill. Appropriations is for all the other bills. It's for all the bills that are proposed during the course of a year where there's some spending component or some cost to government. And people are like, oh, well, that can't be 90% of the bills. And it's like, well, no, it always is. Because right. Let's say you proposed a bill right now that said that, no talking on your phone when you're in your car, you have to have a headset. Well, of course, there are costs to that. For first of all the government employees who have cell phones in their car to communicate, they all need headsets. So the government often has to comply with these laws and they'd have to buy headsets. Secondly, there would be enforcement costs. The CHP would have to pull more people over if it found them, going like this versus talking on a headset. And so that bill will be scored by the Appropriations Committee. They'll say, costs of the government will be, 400 million or 40 million, and enforcement costs will be 4 million, and it'll be offset by revenues from the tickets. And so this bill will cost $35 million, right? And then the rules of the House specify that any bill that, at least in the Assembly, any bill that costs more than $150,000 goes on suspense. And what that means is that that bill stops in its tracks after it's had its hearing in appropriations. And then towards the end of the first House deadline or the legislative year, there's a suspense determination. Right. And people will say, why suspense? Well, I talked to some veterans and they asked to remain nameless, but they sent me some emails and they gave me some of the history of the committee. And apparently John Vasconcelos created the committee with Speaker Brown back in 1995, and it split off from Ways and Means, which was more of a federal-like system that was a very powerful budget-like committee. But I thought that the suspense process was genuinely created to take a look at the proposed spending for the year. Because obviously, if you have hearings in January and February and March and April, and somebody's bill just happens to get in earlier, and you pass that bill out, and it's a very costly bill, and then there's a really meritorious bill that comes in April, the money could be gone, right? So I thought it was to get a big picture of all the spending and then pass it out all at one time. That's part of it. But the consensus was, no, it was really created to really kill bills without a trace. So I guess it's a little bit of policy and a little bit of politics. But that's the backstory, I think, that people need to understand the Appropriations Committee.
And I guess the $150,000 threshold, from 1995 to now, that seems like a de minimis amount. Has there been talk about raising that threshold on suspense, or is it that amount for a reason?
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I want to say at some point it was 75,000, and I want to say there was a difference between the houses at some point, and I don't know what that is now, but I want to say at some point it was even less. It was 75,000. Wow. But yeah, you could argue it should be inflation adjusted. But the fact of the matter is, a whole lot of bills will, if being that California is such a bill factory and there's often 3,000 bills in a 2-year legislative session, you can, if you've got 1,500 bills proposing to spend $1 million, that's a lot of money. Right. That's still an awful lot of money.
So I guess you recall, the suspense season's coming up, and the suspense file announcement day is like the biggest announcement day. It's kind of like our version of the NFL draft or something like that. This big mysterious thing that happens. Do you recall like how many bills that would be on the file, and how many announcements you'd have to review before suspense day?
Yeah, so it would be 300 to 600, and that is an awful lot. I mean, it really is just a lot. That day is just difficult logistically because you have to announce 300 outcomes in that hearing. And you often sound like an auctioneer. You have to talk very, very fast to get them done. There's just a logistical question. And then, of course, there is the substance. There is the substance of going through those 300 bills with the appropriations staff and then with the speaker and really making a call on each of those bills. And it was agonizing because, another little factor that people don't grasp is that every member of the legislature, and certainly every member of your house and your caucus, when it's your house's bills, when it's house of origin, you have to not just be mindful of what does this bill do from a cost benefit perspective and what does this bill do politically if you put it on the floor, but you have to be mindful of how is this member getting taken care of. I'll tell you an anecdote. When I was chair of appropriations, there was a big new class that came in. And there was a member of the legislature who, let's just say he had a district in Southern California that is fairly close to mine. And I rode up on the plane with him every single week. And I think he had 8 bills on suspense when all was said and done. And it was my staff's conclusions that these were 8 of the dumbest bills in the history of the legislature. And they gave recommendations that all 8 bills should be held on suspense. And I looked at them and I was like, oh, they can't all be that dumb. And I looked at them. Oh, they're that dumb. They really are that bad. Wow. And so I made a recommendation to the speaker, that all these bills are going to be held. And I should back up a little bit. People also have this thing, how much does the speaker make the determination? How much does the chair? How much does the staff? The reality is that it really is mostly the appropriations chair. There might be, the staff will sit through and they will make genuine, and I mean genuine, substantive, purely policy-based cost-benefit analysis on the bills. And then the chair goes through them and says, I agree with you on that. I don't agree with you on that. And the ratio is mostly, 80-20, 90-10. And then the chair talks to the speaker and then it's maybe like 98-2, in terms of the speaker saying, change that, But, and by the way, I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about this, right? There's a lot of people who try to say that these meetings don't exist, but I think it's a poorly kept secret. But anyway, I looked at these and I was like, staff, I can't overturn you. These are really poorly conceived bills. And then I put that recommendation in, and the speaker saw it. It's like, you can't hold 8 out of 8 bills for member so-and-so. What are you thinking? And I was like, yeah, but they're really, really bad bills, right? But the thing is, there's an example of how, feathers can be ruffled, right? It is just by chance. Maybe it was poor staffing. Maybe it was luck of the draw. Maybe it was that his other bills had not survived or there were 2-year bills. But these bills just happened to be really bad. And then this member would then turn to me and be like, gosh, I was batting, 10% in your committee or 50% in your committee. And it's like, that is what it is. So there really is a tension between good policy and making sure that every member has something to show for their district and for their promoted ideas.
Well, I guess kind of in that situation that you were just talking about where there was 8 horrible bills from one of your colleagues, kind of going back to that question, sometimes do appropriations chairs kind of like talk to each other and say, hey, you take out my trash, I'll take out yours. Like let those bills out and let the Senate deal with them.
They do. When Kevin De Leon was chair of appropriations in Senate and I was chair in the House, we had there was a tweet that we took. We had this little secret meeting, but then someone snapped a picture, and then I forget if I tweeted or he tweeted it, and I put something like, we've got all the answers now. But it was him and his staff with all these binders, and me and my chief consultant with all these binders. And yeah, there is a little bit of that. There is a little bit of horse trading, and there's a little bit of hey, for whatever reason, in this house, that member, all 8 bills got out and now he's 0 for 8 in your house. Well, what happened? I mean, in theory, the appropriation staff should come to the same conclusions, which is this bill is too costly or this bill, makes sense. And so there's a little bit of that goes on, but it's pretty rare that one house is willing to take the bullets for another. If anything, there's more of a rivalry and it's more of hey, you were too harsh on this and this bill is very important to the pro tem. And therefore, there's going to be a hostage exchange where we're going to let more bills out than it is the other way around.
And I guess kind of being the chair of this committee, I guess, how much horse trading is there kind of with the governor's office, with the Senate and et cetera?
Yeah, so there's a lot. We talked about how much my colleagues hated me. now we should talk about how much senators hated me. There was one senator in particular who she had a bill that she really liked, but my staff again looked at it and they're like, this bill is really dumb. It's not only dumb, but it's going to be harmful for California. And I looked at it and I was like, oh God, I agree, right? And by the way, the speaker agreed, everybody agreed. This is a really poorly conceived bill. So I held the bill, and then I had a hearing in her committee, or I'm sorry, I had already passed her committee. And and by the way, the bill that I had left that had gone through her committee was literally motherhood and apple pie. It was a bill to help senior citizens who are victims of elder abuse, not making this up. So she then says, oh, there was something I didn't notice in your bill, which already passed my committee. And she called it back on the last day of the legislative session and killed the bill. And it was just like, I mean, and that's the stupidity you deal with, right? Is like, part of being a lawmaker, I think, is being able to accept the good, the kudos that you get out there, and also to accept the bad. Mm-hmm. Don't believe your good press, don't believe your bad press. And it's also being able to take constructive criticism from the subject matter experts. If I draft a bill on education and the committee is like, nah, this was tried in 1950 and it was a miserable failure, I have to respect that. And I thought it was really crappy that she took a bill like that hostage. But that is typical for the end of session. There's always a tremendous amount of horse trading, and it's the appropriations chair who often has to be the heavy.
Right. So I guess, being the appropriations chair, it's always seen as, oh, you have this power, but I guess, kind of an anecdote you just shared is how is it dealing with your own legislation when you're also judging others?
Well, my staff, my personal staff, was savvy enough to schedule our bills to get out of committees well before the suspense deadline. And because we knew that, man, anything that came up even on a floor vote after suspense, that there was going to be a lot of wounded egos and I was going to suffer tremendously. So we had to try to configure things appropriately. And by the way, my counterpart in the Senate always had to do the same thing. I mean, you knew that day or the weekend after the suspense day, you were going to have 5 more people who are sore at you on the floor who are going to try to take it out on you. It's juvenile, it's stupid, but it's a fact of life. And so it does give you tremendous power, man. When your bill is up before that suspense deadline, right. Hey, it's a unanimous vote, right? Everybody loves you. But afterwards, there's people with daggers out for you. So you just have to plan accordingly.
What I always find so amazing about suspense is that literally nobody knows what's going to happen except for you and maybe your staff and, and maybe the speaker. And there's never any leaks kind of about what's going to happen. How is all this information kept so secret where, members whose bills are in the committees, who you fly up on the plane with every day, don't even know what's going on?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I guess the best way I would say is just there really is a deep tradition among the staff and among the chairs that this is not a committee where you can have a leak from. And also I would try to keep staff on their toes. Every once in a while they would have the printed outcomes and I would change my mind before the hearing and I would say, hey, wipe that out. And I would definitely keep them on their toes because if they went out there and they had promised some lobbyist or some member, right. Hey, you're going to get out, nothing shows that they do not have the power to make that determination than a chair, changing their mind on the last minute. So, there was a lot of, I think, mutual respect. And so we tried to just keep it so that there weren't leaks. But there is obviously a massive temptation, I think, especially when somebody's like freaking out and crying in their soup and, oh my God, to say it's going to be okay. But you can't do that. You just can't do that. I did ask Jeff Long, to compare poker faces. And, because appropriations had a lot of, he said, it had a lot of really interesting personalities, Carol Migden, Darrell Steinberg, Leno, Judy Chu, me, Kevin DeLeon, Felipe Fuentes, a lot of interesting personalities. And I said, who had the best poker face? He said, Judy Chu by far. By far. She just wiped the floor with all you guys. I mean, a member would talk to her and be like, this bill is for the kids and it's so important and it's my number one priority. And she just like, okay, that's great. Next, so Judy Chu was obviously the best poker face.
Obviously, bills can be amended in appropriations. I guess how often would members, come to you and seek your counsel about, what you thought of their bill and how they could fix it just to get by you? Is that something that would happen?
Yeah, more often, you'd have there's always some junior member of the legislature who would take out the fiscal component of the bill and appropriations and then amend it back in later. Mm-hmm. So let's say you propose some bill, we're gonna pull people, we're gonna create a program in the state to create traffic stops, much like the DUI checkpoints, except we're gonna do it for cannabis. Okay, so you might have the intent part of that bill, but then Approps would score it and be like, this is going to cost $400 million a year, and we got to give the money to we got to buy all the breathalyzers for the CHP to do this, or for the local police. You always have a member who's too cute by half. They will amend that out. They'll amend out the fiscal piece. They'll be like, well, the state shall spend no money on this. We're just going to create this program. And then it'll pass Approps, and then later on in the next house, they'll put back in, now we're going to spend $400 million. And it's like, I mean, in a situation like that, Approps just calls the bill back. And but that would be more often than members seeking guidance. But I will say that, the staffs do a lot of hard work. The appropriation staff does a tremendous amount of hard work to calculate these things. And then the personal staff of the members would work with them and say, how can we do this? How can we thread the needle to get it out? And by the way, that does bring in, I think some of the mythology of the committee, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. The top 4 myths of the Appropriations Committee. And I'll come back to I'll come back to the amendment. But the first myth or the mythology, I think, is we touched on a little bit. Is it the speaker? Is it the chair? Is it the staff? And again, the staff makes truly legitimate 100% substance and policy-based determinations, and then they walk the chairperson through those recommendations. And remember, this is more of an art than a science. I mean, sometimes they might say that if we pass this bill, it's going to result in lawsuits, and the chair might say, "Yeah, I don't really believe that." So it is a subjective determination, but I'd say 80% of the determinations are made by the staff, or recommendations. And then the chair maybe changes, 15 or, another 15 to 20%. And then the speaker only changes 1 to 3%. And a lot of it depends on the speaker, and a lot of it depends on the chair having a good rapport with the speaker and some trust. But when I was there, with Speaker Perez and the early days of Speaker Atkins, there was a lot of trust. And, I think they respected my recommendations. And so they didn't flip me that much. So that's one of the myths. A lot of people say it's just the speaker. No, it really isn't. It's the chair, and it's the chair staff. The second one is that somehow the committee doesn't follow rules, that it is just there's no recorded votes and it doesn't really follow things. Well, the legislature can only act by votes. So technically, when the chair announces an outcome, it is doing it with the will of the committee backing up the chairperson. And there have been a couple times where the committee has revolted and not backed up the chairperson. And I remember a couple times in my tenure, and certainly when other people were chair of the committee. But the bottom line is, legislatures are all about rules, and things are done in appropriations by recorded vote when appropriate, or they're done by operation of rules. And, a simple one would be that when an item goes to suspense, that's the rule of the House. A simple thing is, it costs more than X, it goes on suspense. An item coming off suspense, well, it's done by either unanimous consent or by a vote of the majority party. And if an item is staying on suspense, it just means that there was no motion to remove it. And that's one of the dirty secrets of the process, which the chair people are going to hate for me to tell the whole public, which is any member can make a motion against the chair if they really want. I don't recommend doing it, but when the chair announces that a bill was held on suspense, a member can make a motion to hold it or to take it off suspense, and then there will be a recorded vote. That happened once in my tenure, and it failed miserably. But it absolutely can happen, and it's all done by rules and procedures. The other myth is that the committee acts just by cost, and this is one that I really tried to dispel, and I was very, very unsuccessful with members. Every once in a while, a member would have a bill, and they would say, this bill only spends $5 million. It's budget dust. It's not that much money. And I would say, it's not a cost analysis. It's a cost benefit analysis. And what I mean by that is, every year the committee would have bills that did something absolutely profound, but cost billions of dollars. If you're going to provide healthcare to kids who, desperately need it, that's going to cost a lot of money, but it's worth it. It's a cost benefit analysis. But if you've got some stupid idea that's going to cost just $5 million, that's $5 million that I, as chair who take the mandate seriously, don't want wasted. And so, every member would be, no, it's a cost benefit analysis. And that's something that I, would always try to drill down. There are stupid bills that aren't even worth $150,000. Right. And then the final myth, and that's the one that you alluded to, and I brought it up in my mind, is people will say that the biggest power that the Appropriations Committee has is the power to hold. And yes, that's true. It's the closest thing to a legislative veto. You are governor on 90% of the bills. The real biggest power is the power to amend, because amendments in the other committees are negotiated largely on the microphone, and they'll happen, during the committee, and the author's there's some back and forth, and the witnesses weigh in. But in appropriations, as you know, on that draft day, you're just announcing the amendments, and they don't even go into print till the weekend after. So, there'd be a bill. Again, let's go back to the bill on, the marijuana, the cannabis checkpoints, right? You would say, do pass as amended to remove the mandate and to change it into a study bill, and that's the amendment, right? And it's just done. It's announced, and that power was far more profound, because it's far more subtle. And whenever you have subtlety in the legislature, it's a more profound power.
I guess, yeah, that was going to be my next question is, amending these bills into studies or not even relevant studies. I guess, how often did you use that? And then do those studies actually ever happen?
During my tenure, we had to use that a lot because, again, depths of the Great Recession, the state was in a massive budget crisis. I mean, just to give you an idea, I was in the legislature for 7 budgets, 7 end of sessions, and 7 legislative years. And not once in my 7-year tenure did we have Member Day. Member Day is a tradition where members of each district can come forth and propose a project that means a lot to their district. And it's essentially pork spending, but it's good pork. You say, my district always needed a park in this area, and you get a couple of $1 million to spend as you wish. In my 7-year tenure, there was not one Member Day. It's been resuscitated now, and it certainly existed leading up to mine. You could argue that type of spending is why we got ourselves in so much trouble. But my tenure as appropriations chair was, toil and crisis. And so, yeah, there were some great ideas where people would come forward, and we would have to say, this program is taken out of the bill and it's turned into a study. Do the studies happen? Yeah, they do. Do people pay attention? Sadly, no. I really took the Jerry Brown attitude, which is every study bill is really not worth it. You might as well abandon it. I mean, we live in a very information-driven world, and almost every bit of information is at our fingertips. There's a scientist who studied it. It's available on Google. If you need to know about a policy, go out there and find the study. Don't charge the state of California to do it. And that was my opinion. And I can also tell you that another profound conclusion that I had in appropriations, which I don't think too many members get, is this. I left with a really big picture, which is there really are too many bills in the California legislature. I mean, some of the listeners are like, oh my God, no shock to that. But what I mean is every year, if you take a hot issue like human trafficking, I would get 7 bills on the topic that really just did the same little tiny thing, but the member wanted to check a box. Oh, I fought human trafficking. And these bills were very hard to hold. It's like, hey, Mike, what do you got to get? Why are you protecting human trafficking? Well, I'm not. But there's 7 bills that each cost money. And the members of those 7 bills I submit should have gotten together at the beginning of the year, put forth an omnibus bill that really did something, and they should have all signed their names to it. That's how Congress does stuff.
Right.
In the California legislature, too many bills, way too many bills.
I guess why, that was my next question, kind of when you're talking about this, is that's kind of how Congress operates, right? These big bills move, fewer bills move out. Why isn't there that same mentality here in California where it seems like everyone wants, I guess, to do things their own way instead of kind of working as a team?
It's a good question. I would submit we would probably get better products like that when there was one, I can't even say who it was because I think it would be obvious, but there was a lot of talk about reform from somebody in a powerful position to reform the legislature. And that person asked for my opinion as I was leaving the legislature. And the proposal that I came forth with was to reduce the number of committees. Right now, there's like 30, 40 committees. Reduce them to like 9, and 9 committees with a membership of 9. And you can be on one committee. And you should have these super committees that have jurisdiction over profound areas. Because, as we alluded to earlier, you have budget and appropriations and rev and tax and PERS, 4 fiscal committees in each house. You have education, higher education, and some other education-related committees. You have environmental substances and toxic, blah, blah, blah. You have natural resources. You have utility. You have all these things that sort of have a thing in the environment. I think there should be 9 committees of 9 in the Assembly, minus the Speaker. That would be 80 members, right? And you would have, you also should have, like, maybe the committee should put forth, 1 or 2 big bills where the people who have an interest in that subject matter and an expertise would weigh in on. I don't know why we don't do it. I'm sure the people in Congress believe that there's less opportunities for members to go their own way because you have to wait in line and you have to, you'll be a nameless member who maybe gets an amendment in a bill in committee. But I actually like that. I think, if you truly care about moving forth a subject matter, you don't care, be that nameless member who contributes in the committee system and get your text in the bill. You're going to end up doing just as much good as if your name was on the bill.
Yeah. The system changes as you're going out now. These new members have 12 years to kind of serve here in the legislature, kind of take their time, kind of working one of these committees, kind of, having your experience, if you were to sit on the Appropriations Committee for, 6 to 8 years, I guess, how would your process change or, would you operate any differently?
Yeah, excellent question. So, the Appropriations Committee, I think, works very well. It is designed to be a dispositional committee. I don't think I have to tell this to most of your Sacramento audience. They know how often a bill goes through the process under what people call in common parlance courtesy votes. They're not true courtesy votes, but that's a discussion for another day. But what I mean is, with the tradition of one-party rule in Sacramento and vast majorities of one party and the need for collegiality and the need for, you might need somebody next for your big thing, how often do we see a bill go to the first committee and it's just not cooked yet? The staff has not done the work. The members not done the work. People look at the bill. They say there's a lot of holes in it. The first committee, the substantive committee that, says this bill's not ready for prime time. But when it comes time to vote, the members on the committee say, I'm going to give you my vote today with the promise that you fix it, blah, blah, blah. Right. And you see bills sometimes go through the whole year before they do that. Well, again, appropriations, you're there to take the bullets for the Speaker. You're there to make the tough decisions. You're there to make sure that stuff that is not ready doesn't cost the state money and doesn't become law. So it really is the committee where it's designed for the chairperson to make that tough decision and to say, sorry, it's just not ready. It's going to cost too much money. I'm holding this bill. Take it again, take it up next year. So I really do think it fulfills an important role. Frankly, governors love the Appropriations Committee. I know right now that there's, I keep hearing that the governor loves one appropriations chair because it saves a lot of things from getting on his desk. I'll give you a sense of how much governors like the Appropriations Committee. I don't know if people can see this, but Jerry Brown once wrote me a note, and here it is. And he said, Mike, thanks for all your hard work. And then he wrote with big exclamation marks, keep holding. And what people understand is, the Appropriations Committee, when you hold the bill on suspense, you're holding it. And so that's what he means by that. To people who are not familiar with Sacramento, like, what the hell does he mean? But keep holding. He wanted me to basically make as many of these tough decisions so the stuff wouldn't end up on his desk.
I guess, that's something you were talking about. One of the myths of the Appropriations Committee is how much percentage is staff, how much is percentage is you, how much percentage is the Speaker. I guess, what percentage is the governor? How often would the governor call you and say, hey, Mike, can you hold X, Y, Z?
Excellent question. So the Appropriations Committee is also unique in that it has a member of the executive branch that sits in on the hearings, and that is the Department of Finance, or AKA the Governor's Office of Budget. And they would help with scoring the bill and assigning it. And let's just say that if they really hated a bill, they would make their positions known through their fiscal analysis. So, every once in a great while, we would have a bill come through, and more often when I was a member than when I was the chair, could I be this flippant? But we would have a bill that would come through that would say, we're going to collect another data point on driver's licenses, right? And let's say it was like, okay, we want to, rather than having a donor sticker, we want it to be in the computer system if you're a donor, and we want it printed right on your license. And if the governor did not like that bill for whatever reason, we would get a cost estimate from his Department of Finance that was like, this bill will cost $30 million for the DMV to implement. And there was one hearing where we had a pretty similar proposal. And I said, a question for the Department of Finance. Really, it would cost $30 million to reprogram the computers to do this? Oh, yes, it would, Assemblymember Gatto. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to quit the legislature right now because I know how to program computers and I'll do it for $10 million. And they're like, and it's just like, some of the point is that some of these or some of these cost estimates were so crazy.
Right.
That's how they would let their opinion be known. And it would be a big flashing light. If you pass this bill, we will veto it. Right. And that's more often how the governor would weigh in on these bills.
That's funny. And I guess, are there some, memorable or, bills that you held that, you can share, or some bills that you did that?
I think we're sufficiently past this time where I can tell the story. I've told bits and pieces of it before, but there was a bill proposed by Isidore Hall. And for 2 or 3 years,
I was going to ask you about this one, the condom bill, right?
Yep, the condom bill, the infamous condom bill. So for 2 or 3 years, Mr. Hall and I were not on speaking terms. But it's sort of now all is forgiven. And when we see each other at events and stuff, we laugh about it. We enjoy laugh about it. But for a while, it was so tense. And so for people who are not familiar with this bill, there was a interest group, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which is itself controversial, which I believe passed a ballot measure in the county of Los Angeles that said that for pornographic video shoots, you've got to wear a condom.
Right.
And, immediately the different movie producers, not just porn producers, sued and said, wait a second, you're trying to tell me the content of the stories of my movies? First Amendment. You can't tell me what I've got to depict on film. The next step is government tells me that my actors have to wear a shirt that say practice safe sex. That's First Amendment, right? They sued. The county ended up spending millions of dollars in legal fees, but then they come forward and they sponsor this bill. Isidore Hall carries it. Now they want to do it statewide. Statewide, you film porn, you got to wear a condom. I personally, I happen to practice as a First Amendment lawyer before I got elected to the legislature. I took a big bill for a network all the way up through the federal court process. I won, and I know a little bit about the First Amendment. The bill had by the way, it had an enforcement cost because we needed to send OSHA, which is, for those of you not familiar, it's the California's Employee and Workplace Safety Inspection Division. They would have to go to porn sets and they'd have to be like, hey, Are you wearing a condom? So you can see it where this is all, devolving into the ridiculous. But so there was a cost. It was de minimis. I want to say $350,000 a year, something like that. But then the staff came back and was like, the state's going to get sued. It's going to cost money to defend, so on and so forth. There's a big debate. Can you even consider the cost of lawsuits in a bill? Whatever. But the point is, I look at the bill and I'm like, okay, probably not constitutional. I don't know how I feel about this. Honestly, I don't have an opinion, but I just thought it was kind of goofy. So I decided to hold it. This is where I've never told this story. Speaker Perez said to me in the meeting, he goes, Mike, do you really want to hold this bill? It means a lot to Izzy. Do you really want to take on the AIDS Healthcare Foundation? They are vindictive SOBs. And I said, look, I got to do what I believe in. The staff believes that it's, really goofy and it's probably not constitutional. So yeah, I'm going to hold it. And by the way, Speaker Perez, there's a classic example. He didn't flip me. He didn't turn me over. He said, okay, I respect you. Right. So anyway, when I announced it, Isidore goes ballistic. He starts tweeting some stuff that he since deleted. AIDS Healthcare Foundation mails in my district. They send all these illegal mailers where they don't identify themselves, saying that I love the porn industry. One of my opponents, and this is I've never told the story. They did something which I think is the cruelest thing that any of my opponents have ever done in the history of all of my opponents, and I think in the history of dirty politics. I had a house before I got elected. I've long time rented that house out. I couldn't afford it when I got elected to the legislature, so I had to rent it because I couldn't afford the mortgage payments on my legislative salary. I rented it out. And one of the people who rented it from me was a married couple. They had 2 kids. And I just knew the lady as a housewife who rented my house from me. They actually pulled up my Form 700s, looked her up, and found out that in a previous life, she had been a porn performer. Did I know that? I had no idea. When someone applies to rent your house, you don't ask them if they've been a porn performer 20 years ago. And you certainly don't slut shame, people like this. they started attacking me saying, oh, he's getting money from the porn industry. And it was like, oh my God, this is like totally crazy. I've never taken a penny from the porn industry. I had no idea that this poor, nice lady in her mid 50s filmed porn, which is totally, her prerogative, 20 years ago. It was one of the most painful and awful, ugly, episodes in my life. But that's an example of the bullets you take as appropriations chair. And I certainly took a lot of them. I mean, some of the mailers, I wish I had them to hold up to you. You would not believe the mailers they sent to my district. It was like, Mike Gatto loves the money shot, and like all this stupid stuff. It was just like,
I remember the tweets. I remember being with Isidore during this time and just how angry he was and the tweets. That was a funny time.
Condoms and porn.
Exactly. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the background. Fascinating stuff. I guess before we go, is there anything you want to say out there to the former members who might still scorn you?
Just know that, look, 9 times out of 10, I still love you, no matter how much you hate me. And I was doing a role during the Great Recession, but and I don't apologize for it.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Glad to talk to you again, and hopefully can have you on again soon. Always good talking.
Here as always.
All right. Thanks.